Mass hysteria, in sociology and psychology, is a phenomenon that transmits collective illusions of threats, whether real or imaginary, through a population and society as a result of rumors and fear. On December 1688, King James of England, Ireland, and Scotland was deposed. On Thursday, the 13th of December, an alarm rang out, warning locals of an impending Irish attack. From Norfolk to Derby, Birmingham, and 16 other countries in England, hundreds of thousands of men and women took up arms to defend their homes. For days, they blocked the roads, discharged firearms, and beat drums, pots, and pans to bewilder their attackers. The news that Irishmen were sacking and slaughtering their way through England incited the local government in a few countries to levy small armies to defend themselves. However, this band of Irish marauders never existed. In 1689, dissident British ministers looking to establish their Bible-based society settled in New England. Publications by Joseph Glanville and Cotton Mather years before sought to prove that witches, demons, and ghosts existed. These publications intermingled with the Puritan belief that women were inherently more susceptible to damnation than men. This led to a slew of witch accusations, mainly towards women. The internal strife Salem was already known for fueled the frenzy that was to encompass Massachusetts. Between 1692 to 1693, over 200 people were accused of practicing witchcraft, 30 of whom were found guilty. 19 of those were executed by hanging, 1 by pressing, and at least 5 others died in prison. Mass hysteria is also described as a conversion disorder, in which a person has physiological symptoms affecting the nervous system in the absence of a physical cause of illness, and which may appear in reaction to psychological distress. In a school located in the West Bank town of Arabah, a girl reported to her teacher that she was coughing and unable to breathe. In a few hours, this ailment spread throughout the entire school. However, upon reaching the hospital, doctors could not find a cause for these symptoms. Over the next 2 weeks, 943 people were hospitalized for the same symptoms. The Center for Disease Control assumed toxic gas to be the cause of the epidemic, but was unable to locate its source. After local newspapers called the event a poisoning, the Israeli and Palestinian governments made frequent arrests and accused each other of committing chemical warfare. A subsequent CDC report ruled the cause of the epidemic psychosomatic. Further investigation by the Israeli Health Ministry noted that 80% of the cases were psychological distress fueled by the hysteria. On January the 13th, 1962, 3 students in an all-girls Christian school in Kakasha village of northwest Tanganyika started laughing and crying hysterically. This affliction spread to other adolescents in and around the village. Often, when those afflicted were restrained, they reacted violently. The episodes lasted for about a year and displayed in 16-day cycles, lasting for hours on end before a short remission. When examined by doctors, the only abnormalities the afflicted exhibited were slightly dilated pupils or exaggerated tendon reflexes. Outside of mass hysteria, doctors could not find any other reasons for such behavior. Mass hysteria has also materialized economically, often in speculative markets. In the late 1500s, tulips reached Western Europe through imports from Turkey. Despite their fragility, they were considered a luxury item. The discovery of a rare strain of the flower, colloquialized as broken bulbs due to their striped, multicolored pattern, incited the frenzy that swept Holland. In 1634, a single tulip could be worth up to 6,000 florins, about $800,000 today. Anyone who could get their hands on the rare flower traded them on the stock exchange of Amsterdam. Investors traded the flowers on margin. They took out loans up to 6 times greater than their wages, which only helped propel its value. By the end of 1637, the bubble burst and the prices fell. The demand for the plant starkly declined. Buyers were simply unwilling to pay for a plant that would be essentially worthless a year later. The internet was invented in the 1960s. The subsequent decades of widespread use and adoption led to the creation of the World Wide Web in 1989. Numerous internet and tech-based startup companies emerged and adopted a growth-based business model. This was unlike the fundamental business models that dominated the NASDAQ trading floor at the time. These companies were seen as forerunners of an emerging industry. The traffic their websites garnered was the metric used to evaluate them. Venture capitalists actively sought out and invested in .com IPOs. Soon, the markets were flooded by internet and tech-based startup companies. From January 1995 to March 2000, the NASDAQ Composite Index rose by 582%. Investors were driven by the emotional reaction called FOMO, the fear of missing out. Instead of investing when the stocks offered the most attractive risk-to-return ratio, this emotional reaction pushed traders and investors to overinflate the value of the stocks. However, when investment capital dried up, the NASDAQ fell by 75% from March 2000 to October 2002. The cataclysmic sell-off erased most of the gains built in the bubble and bankrupted several unprofitable companies. Researchers for decades have sought to determine why and how mass hysteria takes form. An experiment carried out by the National Center for Biotechnology Information recorded how media attention and public consensus would affect the spread of psychogenic illness. The experiment was carried out by inducting a contagion into a participant, who would be placed into one of three control groups. The control groups were recorded as the No Intervention Control Group, the Psychogenic Illness Induction Group, and the Psychogenic Illness Induction Plus Media Group. The results showcased that the control group with the media spreading threatening information led more people to report symptoms. Additionally, when a placebo pill was introduced as a cure to the illness, both control groups that believed they had a contagion reported even more symptoms. This study highlighted the role social consensus and groupthink play in spreading mass hysteria. Groupthink was coined in the early 1970s by psychologist Irving L. Janis. He defined it as a psychological drive for consensus at any cost that suppresses dissent and appraisal of alternatives in cohesive decision-making groups. Janis listed 8 symptoms of groupthink: illusions of invulnerability, unquestioned beliefs, rationalizing, stereotyping, self-censorship, mind guards, illusions of unanimity, and direct pressure. What is unanimous in all instances of mass hysteria is those influenced feed off their peers' emotional reactions, causing the panic to escalate. This in turn discourages independent thinking and differing opinions. Think about the decisions you make and who or what influences you to make them. Think about the groups you choose to associate with and why you choose them. Think about the values you attribute to yourself and why they matter to you. Think about the information you consider factual and where you were introduced to it. You might find that you aren't as unimpressionable as you thought. Anyway, if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more. Thank you.